The final 24 hours of Benito Mussolini, the fall of Ildus, on April 1945, a man who once commanded the loyalty of millions found himself hiding in the back of a German truck, wearing an oversized Wehrmacht coat and helmet, desperately trying to escape across the Swiss border. Just hours earlier, Benito Mussolini had been the dictator of Italy. Now, he was a fugitive, his fate hanging by the thinnest of threads. This is the story of Mussolini's final 24 hours, a dramatic collapse that ended not with glory, but in humiliation and blood. Let's dive into his 5 final moments. 1. The flight at dawn, Mussolini's convoy rolled through the small town of Como, near the Swiss border. The once mighty dictator was now just another frightened man, hiding among retreating German officers and loyal fascists, their families clutching jewelry and papers, the last remnants of a dying empire. His mistress, Clara Petacci, refused to leave him, choosing love over safety, a choice that would seal her fate. As their convoy crept along Lake Como, partisan checkpoints tightened around them. The Allies were closing in. The dream of fascist Italy was over. 2. The checkpoint at Dongo. By midday, near the village of Dongo, the convoy met a partisan roadblock. The resistance fighters were ordinary Italians, farmers, workers, and students, but hardened by years of brutal war. They inspected each vehicle carefully. At first, the Germans looked convincing, but something was off. One of the soldiers wore a uniform that didn't quite fit. Another couldn't answer in German. Then one partisan saw a familiar face. The jawline, the eyes, the man from countless propaganda posters. He whispered, "Et lui?" It's him. Mussolini's disguise had failed. Within minutes, the convoy was surrounded. The Juice of Italy, the man who once ruled with absolute power, was now a prisoner of the very people he had oppressed. 3. The long night. That night, Mussolini was held in a small farmhouse in Bonzanigo, guarded by men who had lost everything under his rule. Gone were the palaces, the marble halls, the cheering crowds. Now, the dictator paced a cramped room with bare stone walls, pleading for his life. He promised gold, information, anything. But the partisans were unmoved. To them, he was not a leader. He was a war criminal, responsible for years of suffering, executions, and war. Beside him, Clara Petacci refused to leave, clutching his hand, her loyalty as tragic as it was doomed. Throughout the night, resistance leaders debated his fate. Should he face a trial or swift justice? By dawn, the decision was made. 4. The execution on the morning of April 28th. Communist partisan commander Walter Audizio, known as Colonel Valerio, arrived with orders. There would be no trial, no negotiations, no mercy. Mussolini and Petacci were placed in a truck and driven to the small village of Giuliano di Mezzegra. At 4:10 p.m., they were led to a villa gate, Villa Belmonte. The once proud Deuce stood trembling, trying to hold on to the last fragments of his dignity. Audizio raised his weapon and fired. Within seconds, it was over. The man who had ruled Italy for 23 years lay dead beside the woman who refused to abandon him. 5. The display in Milan. But the story didn't end there. The partisans knew that Italy and the world would need proof that fascism was truly dead. They loaded the bodies into a truck and drove them to Milan's Piazzale Loreto, the same square where fascists had once displayed the corpses of resistance fighters. Now, the tables had turned. At dawn on April 29th, crowds gathered as Mussolini's body hung upside down beside Petacci's, a grim, symbolic reversal of power. For millions of Italians, it was the final, brutal end of an era. In just 24 hours, Benito Mussolini's empire vanished, replaced by a nation determined to rebuild from the ashes of dictatorship and war. History would remember his rise, but it would never forget his fall.